For those people who have the mobile phones, the smartphones, and you've already logged on to slido.com on your phone and put in the event code X115, now is your chance, if you haven't already done it, to send us a very pithy question, as opposed to a very long statement. A very pithy question like why or what, with a few extra words, but really tight. So, and then we have a chance to take questions from the Slido. And actually, people have been doing this, and we've already got a few questions, and we'll throw them to the panel for a discussion. So, and one of the things we're not going to do is go deep down into individual roads, if that's all right, because this is a broad citywide plan. So I wanted to go to this question where we've got the question, why don't we make the light rail crossing of the Manukau part of the old Mangere bridge replacement, reducing cost and negative visual impact of another bridge? So the question is, why don't we use that old Mangere bridge to do that? Anyone got a particular view on that?
Well, we need to rebuild the old one even for people to walk across it, so we'll have to do a new bridge, but that's a good alignment, and there's a good argument for that, and it should be studied.
I think you'll find that the piers of the new bridge are designed to support heavy rail, and you can do lots of things on it.
Transit, pull that quick one up.
Yes, so the next question we've got is, can we talk about other important issues like resilience, health and safety, energy? We haven't really talked much about climate change and carbon emissions tonight.
We ought to.
Well, let's get into it, because London has got this target of 2050 no carbon emissions. Can we actually do that in New Zealand? Because we're pretty addicted to our cars and diesel buses.
That's the worst argument I've ever heard, Bernard. This idea about personal character is really irrelevant. We need to... Supply leads demand. People use what there is. No one can catch a train that isn't there. If we only build roads, people will drive. It's really easy. It's not about a character, a personal character, or a weird character that we have that other places don't have. Australians and Americans love their cars, and the same kind of men in Australia and America love their cars in the same way that Peter does. It isn't, we aren't uniquely different from anywhere else. Auckland is a city, and we have all of the rules that any city faces. But we don't have an underground.
So,
we're getting one.
Stephen.
Well, I think that, that's just one of the attractions of concentrating growth in one location, because it creates an opportunity to do a innovation kind of development. So you'd be looking at solar energy supply rather than continued dependence on... Where we kind of retrofit in existing networks, it is always much harder to be innovative because you've got pockets of developments all over the place. But scale development in one location, which would enable you to bring on the latest technology, both from energy, resilience, and live, work, play, creates an opportunity to design our future rather than trying to retrofit. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't do development in the existing, of course we should, but that should be targeted much more closely at public transport corridors than allowing a little bit of growth everywhere. And the combination of the two would potentially be transformational.
Cynthia, the whole area of health and safety, the deaths and serious injuries, how much of a factor should that be in the debate?
I think the first thing I want to say is that to be fair to the local government here, the Mayor has actually made a commitment to C40, and he has said that from 2025 we will not buy any more public transport or put any more public transport on the roads that is not zero emissions, so that's happening.
That's 7 years away.
That's pretty soon in the lifetime of a bus.
It is, and it is. Understand that you probably have in Auckland the newest bus fleet that I've ever seen anywhere in the world, so understand that. You could change them, in a couple of years. I don't think you can afford to change the fleet. But so that's a sensible solution, is that as the fleet ages and you do a normal fleet replacement, you'd put it out and you'd change them then. So the Mayor has made that statement. You guys keep beating yourselves up. You have put in electric chains in the last few years. You have got... Your transport there are high emissions from transport, and it's 37%, don't quote me on the exact figure, of the emissions in Auckland are from transport. and we're talking about land transport. I haven't even had a discussion about what's happening off your harbour, although I did note when we were at the Port Open Day the other day, they've made a commitment that by 2050, I think, that they're going to be emissions free. There is an enormous amount being done. Auckland Transport do little things like we're changing our fleet out to an electric fleet. So people are trying to do things. You're the most forward-thinking city in terms of what electric vehicle uptake. We've got to do more policy work in terms of electric vehicle uptake to make it more attractive. But I think, there's a lot being done, and you are progressive. It's not enough. We need to continue to have the conversations, but the Mayor and the councillors have made that commitment, so I think, that is happening. In terms of the thing that I'm alarmed about most at the moment is DSI rate. So
DSI meaning?
Your deaths and serious injuries on your roads. So in the last 3 years, it's gone up by 78%. That is extraordinary. So, I think people need to have to start having the conversation, not only about getting out of cars, that's an obvious one, because congestion is the biggest thing in your minds today, until one of your loved ones is killed on the road. And then that will be in the foremost of your minds. So we need to start thinking about having that conversation about why people are dying on our roads at a rate of about 1 a week. That might be the wrong stat. Somebody said more than that. So, the statistics that I looked on the MOT website, but we need to be having that conversation. Why are people dying on our roads? And there's a lot of reasons, but we need to start thinking about how we're going to invest to
So what sort of
stop
things
that.
could you do on motorway and other networks to reduce that rate?
I think there's a lot that's been... Oh, Patrick might want to...
Well, Vision Zero is the obvious thing. This is what works everywhere else in the world, and we don't need to do local studies to find how we're different. We just need to adopt it and get on with it and make it policy.
So
Simple.
Vision Zero isn't in the current plans.
It's government policy, and it's certainly hinted at in the Auckland plan in slightly vague language, but it needs to be adopted as firm strategy. Yeah.
Right, we've got some couple of questions here about bikes. We haven't actually talked much about cycling here as part of the discussion. What do our panel think about, everyone using, or a lot more people using bikes, particularly the electric bikes, which there's a few hills in Auckland. I'm from Wellington, there's some real hills there. They're quite useful.
I think you should answer a bike story.
Yes, Peter.
I'll surprise you, because half the time I do actually commute to work on an electric bike, which you weren't expecting at all. And the issues are quite simple.
Is it a Holden Commodore electric bike?
No, it's a nice electric bike, pedal assist. For me, the issues are simple. It rains a lot, and when it rains, it's not so nice, and it's less safe. And whilst the cycle network is fantastic where it is, where you leave the dedicated cycle lane and into the traffic, it's not safe. So, for me, there's a whole lot of issues about how you manage that interface, where we need to spend more money in order to make it more attractive, and I think the balance tips quite quickly when you get into that space. And the health benefits of exercise alongside everything else, in my mind, makes it well worth pursuing.
And are we actually including those health benefits in the sort of cost-benefit analysis?
No, this is a problem, because along with death and serious injury, there's public health outcomes. So we are now suffering an absolute epidemic of what are called the diseases of inactivity, and this epidemic is principally a result of cars. So we drive because it's convenient, and we are not getting really simple daily exercise. So the exercise you get just walking to a public transport thing or riding a bike, that sort of daily exercise is incredibly valuable. It adds to your life, it reduces heart disease, diabetes, etc., etc. We need to build this into our daily routine. And cities and countries that have high levels of cycling and walking, like obviously the Dutch and the Danes, have amazing data on public health. It saves a nation a fortune. And human misery is lowered. I mean, everything about the bicycle, it is kind of the most magic pill. It's the most energy. Everything about it works, and we ought to be just doing everything we can to stimulate
Yeah,
it.
but what about when it rains?
There are, I think, there's this amazing technology called raincoats. That it's new, I know, but you'll get there. Look, it's the cities that are well adapted for cycling. People, that's minus 20 in those cities. I mean, hills and rain are small beer. We know what works. It's building a safe network. When you build a safe network, you get a transformational shift to cycling.
It is about the safety factor. I ride bicycle as well, but I won't ride on a road where I have to share it with another vehicle. You just can't feel safe. So, Auckland has invested a lot in cycleways and will continue to invest in cycleways. My view is, my personal view is that strategic cycle network has been hugely successful and it needs to be finished. But we then got to start, and people will go, there's different opinions around the room, of course, but, then we have to start focusing on how we get the kids to use the cycleways and how they're safe. I would not let my son ride to school if he wasn't safe. So we've got to start focusing on that next generation of cycleways in terms of getting kids onto cycleways, not just adults.
We all know what happens in the school holidays, right? The roads get clearer, right? I mean, some people estimate, I've seen estimates, it's around 10% less traffic when kids aren't going to school. And we know what that traffic is. It's parents dropping children off at schools. So it's simply a network of cycleways that were school-centred, and we get kids back to doing what they used to do, and riding to school. They'll learn better, they'll be healthier, and frankly, cycling's a joy, so long as you're not sharing it with an 18-wheeler.
I love cycling. I cycle to and from work in Parliament up the Brooklyn Hill, for those who know Wellington. That's a lot of fun. Up, it's a lot less fun. But we've had a debate in Wellington, and I'm guessing you've had debates like this too, where attempts to put cycleways down roads have caused outrage amongst car drivers, and you've had this incredible political clash between people saying, well, you just got rid of one of my car parks to make this thing, or you're forcing me to open my door out into a main road. I'm going to vote against that and get rid of that councillor that did that and stop it. How do you get around that political, reaction from people who are against that stuff?
Never will. People are allowed to have opinions, and people, they should share their opinions. I love the way Aucklanders do it. I love that we have conversations. In Australia, you just do what you like, and then you don't worry about it. But, so people don't get a say. But, lobby groups are there for a reason. They keep bureaucracy honest, and so I think it's reasonable to have those discussions, and you're allowed to have views either way, but we have to build the system for everyone to use to get, I continue to harp about options, but it has to be safe. At the end of the day, if it's not safe, people won't use it and we will have wasted our money. So we've got to make sure we get that right. So, I think that people should be allowed to have views, and it's just part of...
Change is always fraught.
Yeah.
There's nothing to see here particularly.
Yep. So we've got another question from our Slido system. What do the panel think about congestion charges to come into the city centre? A bit like one of those ring type arrangements that they have in London. I lived in London for a few years and got pinged by it a couple of times and pledged never again to drive my car into town. So what do we think about London-style congestion ring charge things?
So my view is Auckland's not London. Auckland's a very weird shape, long, skinny, two harbours, and the CBD accounts for, we were talking earlier about 16% of employment, which means that anything that focuses just on that actually means a whole lot of people get a completely free ride, and it won't actually necessarily address the challenge. So I'm less convinced about being able to pick up something that is like that and say we'll have one of those. The charge, if we were to go down the route of a charging system, it's going to have to be a whole lot more broad than that to deliver an impact that the transport network can cope with, to deliver outcomes that are equitable in terms of who is paying, and to avoid wholesale land use responses that are unanticipated. I mean, if you only charged around the CBD, for instance, then suddenly doing business in the CBD becomes less attractive. But actually we want lots of businesses to be there because that is the most cost-effective place to provide public transport where we've just spent a whole lot of money getting rail and now building CRL in order to support that sort of stuff. So you need to be quite careful as to how we think about these things.
There's always boundary effects.
London was effective for the first 4 years, correct me if I'm wrong, and the effectiveness fell away after that first 4 years. They haven't been able to put the price up, and it's hugely expensive. In my view, it is. £12 is expensive for me, but you know, I think it did work for a little while. Then people changed the way they used big. You know, they stopped taking big trucks in there, and now little trucks run around. The 3.5 tonne trucks run around in there, so it hasn't been as hugely successful as they would have liked to have been. And I spoke to the lady who used to work for Boris when they put the congestion system in, and you know, people talk about congestion system as a revenue raiser. If we're talking about it as a revenue raiser, we're talking about it for the wrong reason. Another
question through the Slido system is around the light rail idea, which obviously the new government in Wellington has talked about and has been talked about here as well. Is this the solution? Do we just need to whack down 2 or 3 of these light rail projects, create a nice loop around the city? Is that the way to go? Because they're pretty expensive, and you know, it's a big
Nothing
change.
is the solution.
Yep.
So get that out of your head.
Yeah, look, I agree with that. This is a multifaceted issue we've got to deal with. Light rail undoubtedly will make a contribution. I think when we think about light rail, though, we've got to think about the urban planning that goes along with light rail. Just to put it along a corridor to go to and from the airport as an airport connection link, actually it's probably not a particularly marvellous economic investment, but if you could do significant urban development that would enable people who might work and be employed at the airport, who could live within proximity of the light rail, and the city as well, obviously at the other end of the line, and points along, then you can start to get something viable. But we've got to think about transport and land use in a connected way, and too often we talk about transport projects by themselves or urban development by itself, and unless we join the dots between the two, frankly, we're just self-defeating.
But where's the blue ribbon for me to cut, though? How do I, you know, have a big announcement and put on some high vis and cut the blue ribbon if you're talking about systems?
Well, the big announcement then becomes the whole story around how we're growing the city in a much more sensible and smart way. So it's not just the light rail project, but it's also the housing project that goes with it, and it's the employment project that goes with it. That is a much bigger announcement and a fantastic opportunity for any politician.
I mean, transport isn't an end in itself. Transport only has value in as much it supports land use. You know, they're the different sides of the same coin. So Stephen's absolutely right. So the light rail program is a great idea and a really good plan, but it must come with upzoning along its route. People seem to lose their mind when you say the word airport. They seem to focus entirely on them getting on a jet. It's really not about that. It's about the entire journey all the way along, all the people working there, the people in Mangere who have very poor transport options and are very severed by the motorways through there. So it's upzoning along the route. Dominion Road is already semi-intense, and so it's a good place. The buses, as you said before, are full. It's the ideal route through the Isthmus, but it needs to come with an upzoning again along that route.
Right, it is time now to...
Can I just say, the only thing I would add to that, I think light rail is a good solution for the city. The city can't pay for it. It has to be paid for by central government. Ratepayers can't afford it.
That whole point of public health, maybe that's a pitch you can make to Wellington to say that improved public health in Auckland through increased use of cycling and of the bus with, you know, fewer car accidents and the like, could be paid for by cheaper hospital visits that the central government has to pay for.
Yeah, it's very difficult though to ask. I mean, the health system is underfunded, right? So if you were to financialise all the economic benefits of public transport, you would actually have transfers from the health budget to subsidise public transport, but you cannot reasonably expect the health budget to be paying for a light rail system instead of a dialysis machine. Right?
That would be quite a headline, yes.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that maybe there needs to be a more integrated approach to funding this. And we haven't actually talked about the real elephant in the room, which is the current government's adherence to a 20% of net debt target, which is actually stopping Auckland and the rest of the country from building the infrastructure it actually needs for the next generation. In my view, for what it's worth, that 20% debt target is going to make whatever you want to do over the next 10 years really difficult for no good reason. It's time now to open it up to questions from the audience, a bit like the Joseph Parker fight where we invite the audience to come into the ring. It's safe, really it is. But we are going to ask people to put their hands up, and I'm going to pick people, but I really want to ask you nicely at the moment, to keep your questions tight, and they must have a question mark at the end of it. If it's got a full stop or an exclamation mark, not so interested. Question mark, please. So, yes, do we have the microphone as well? So over here, yes, we have someone. Yes, yep. Go for it.
Good evening. My name's Cam. I stand before you as a human being and someone interested in behaviour change. In AT's 2017 report under strategic theme number 2, AT proclaims 93% punctuality when in fact real-time analysis at each stop shows far lower than this. So this arguably impacts on customer satisfaction and uptake of ridership, which is sort of detrimental to what we want to achieve. So my question is two-part. What data do AT use to measure customer satisfaction? And number 2, why do we bother measuring punctuality for our public transport when it's measured only at the origin?
Good questions.
They are good questions. They're not the only person in the world that, not the only city in the world that measures punctuality by origin. For me, that's just, it doesn't measure anything. So if you talk about, and we did it in Brisbane, we started out, and it's a maturity thing, you've got to start to mature your public transport system so people understand that reliability is not about, and punctuality is not about you're punctual because you leave the bus depot at 7 o'clock when you're supposed to. It's about the whole, the whole route. We have to understand that and work more on it. I can't speak to, I've been in the job 6 months, so we know about it, we've got to work on it. I'm surprised about the customer satisfaction story because it's my team who actually goes out and talks to customers, and the customer satisfaction rate is hugely, I was shocked about it, and I tried to investigate a little bit, but we're talking about a 91% customer satisfaction rate. Now, delving into it, it's pretty robust in what I've seen. I hear, you'll hear bad stories on public transport wherever you go in the world. It was late, it was raining, the trains didn't run on time, we've got a strike. But, I think we are trying to look at that more robustly. We're starting to have discussions. Have we got all the answers yet? No, we don't. But your point is valid. How do you actually measure that reliability, the punctuality based on it leaves the depot at that time? So
Patrick,
it's a good point.
Yep. I think there's two things. One of which is that you can get perverse incentives. AT has brought the idea at board level that reliability is the most important thing, the big KPI for the public transport providers. And the problem with this means is that they pad the timetable and then sit outside the station or the stop to get there on time, and then they're really reliable, right? But there's nothing more annoying on this planet than sitting in a train or a bus with the engine off waiting. I mean, so reliability cannot be the only KPI for a service, because you just get really big padded routes, especially when there's a lack of bus lanes, so there's a really unpredictable length of journey. If the road's clear, ironically, you may end up at a stop waiting because the road's too clear and the proposed time is too long. So this is a real bus operations issue and needs to be dug right down into.
Cynthia.
Just quickly, you don't need to harp on it. Everybody's right. World's best practice talks about reliability in a public transport system. So people write contracts around public transport around reliability. They will deliver a reliable service and tell you they deliver it at all costs to the customer. Yeah. You've got to change. We are having that discussion at the moment about how we actually become more customer-centric and more customer-focused and what does the customer want. But world's best practice, Auckland Transport is applying KPIs that are world's best practice. We need to be ahead of the curve and think differently, that's all.
So we have another question here at the back.
Hello, Hugh Chapman. We've had 4 or 5 speakers talking about the big picture, getting more money. But I think there are a lot of things that aren't being done and can be done. For example, coordinating lights. I know that's against the council's opinion because that helps motorists, but that's where the congestion is occurring. If you coordinate lights, and let's face it, I've driven through Wellington every time I've gone there, straight through the middle of the city without stopping, all of a sudden you're going to get people coming into town earlier in the morning, getting to work, parking, and they're off the road. We are spending too long getting stuck in traffic. Fanshawe Street coming off, I know you're talking streets, that's blocked. It should be 90% green lighted so you can get off the motorway. Then people can come into Auckland.
So that's a good
lot of
question.
Things like that. None of the people there are the people who are going to make this decision, but I'd like to hear their comments on
Sure.
that.
So that's a good question about coordination of lights. Can that be done? Good idea.
I was quip on that one. It was an interesting conversation when you talk about driverless cars, but we can't coordinate the traffic lights. You know, there's got to be a better outcome. Hugh, I'd love to give you the answer for that, but you know, how many times do we see sequence after sequence of red light changes? We go down major urban arterials in Auckland. There's got to be something better we can do.
There is a really simple geographic or geometric answer to this, Hugh, which is that if you've got a green light, everyone else has got a red one, including all of those pedestrians trying to get across Fanshawe Street. I mean, I know it's a really lovely idea that you should always have a green light, or I should always have a green light, but I haven't got that magic button in my car.
Okay, we've got another question at the back here.
Yes. I'm a pedestrian mainly. Why are the pavements so awful? I also have a disability, so I'm constantly in fear as I walk from my apartment in Freeman's Bay to the library or to the hospital. The pavements are terrible.
I can answer
Okay, let's
this
talk
one.
about walking. So,
I can answer this one.
Patrick.
There is one contributor to that, and that is that all local road funding in the whole country is roughly half funded by your local authority, in Auckland's case that's Auckland Transport, and half funded from the National Land Transport Fund as directed by NZTA. But NZTA, bless their little cotton socks, refuse to contribute to footpaths. So any local government member, Auckland Transport here or all around the country, has got a decision to make. They can either spend this sum on a road and get it doubled, or if they fix that footpath, they've got to fund it entirely themselves. So there's a financial incentive for local authorities to not bother fixing footpaths.
So shouldn't that be like an ATAP, you know, let's build a systems thing? Because, you know,
Yep.
and I'm curious about that. Cynthia.
To be truthful, I haven't really had time to focus on footpaths, to be truthful, to date. But, you know, I've been out on the network as much as I can. I've met people at intersections that are noted that's the worst intersection in New Zealand and needs money spent on it. I've been out to roads that are, you know, well underdone and don't help the local traffic and are not safe. I've done as much as I can. I haven't focused on footpaths. I need to have a look at footpaths, obviously, because I hear all the time that the local boards and the community are frustrated with footpaths. So we need to actually, I will take it back and have a look at footpaths. I honestly can't answer you today. I don't know what how big the network is for footpaths. I do know we've got 7,468 or 69 kilometres of roads, but I can't tell you footpaths. So if I'm happy to have a chat with that lady about at some stage, but I honestly haven't. It hasn't been in my focus, but it needs to be. So I'll have to take it on notice. Apologies.
Very briefly, I mean, we talked earlier about being fixated on the bright, new, shiny things and dealing with the second order of stuff and the third order of stuff. And my sense is we tend to forget about footpaths, and we shouldn't. They are a really important part of the network. public transport works or doesn't work because of whether or not you can actually get to where you need to catch the train
Drivers
or the
occasionally
bus.
get out of cars.
And they do. And the other thing that I would note, living in an area where Auckland Transport, as a result of Auckland City Council's previous decisions, has been replacing footpaths with concrete. They're only there 5 minutes before some developers dug them up and replaced them with something else and made it look and behave quite differently in a way that's not safe. So a continuing challenge to manage.
Yes, and the tyranny of the orange cones with all that UFB digging up of footpaths, which great fun for Netflix because it gets its service subsidised, but not much fun on a footpath. Yes, we have one final question here.
I'm Greg. To use a business analogy, it seems that our city operates below break even. And some of the panellists have talked about planned urban development and satellite cities and so forth. What do you think is the sweet spot for our population or population density for us to be able to afford a viable public transport structure?
That's a fair question and a good one.
Well, there isn't a perfect one. Auckland is actually surprisingly more dense than people imagine. It's the second densest city in Australasia behind Sydney. Density, of course, is never even. And you can see exactly where public transport is much more heavily patronised. A, where it is, and secondly, in some of our denser areas. Ismouth, for example, is actually quite a really solid medium density. The central city is not only the fastest growing area in the country, it is also really dense at about 10,000 per square kilometre. These are high levels. Auckland, over the last 25 years, has grown about 70-75% up and 25% out. You can see those sprawl burbs, they look big, but actually more people are living in. Auckland is, this is choice, this is revealed preference. People are choosing to live in apartments in the central city. People are choosing proximity. We don't need to wait until we're Tokyo or Manhattan before we have a good public transport network, for example. But the key point is that the most efficient journey is in fact the one that you don't need to take because you're already there. So proximity trumps mobility.
I can't give you a number off the top of my head, but I tell you what density doesn't work is when you put density, even medium density in, and you don't provide any public transport services. So many of you will be familiar with Flatbush, right? I used to live in Botany, close to Flatbush, where they reduced the sections where I was from 650 square metres down to sort of 350 and 250, and the houses went up. No public transport services of any credibility, sort of 1 hour gaps between bus services kind of at peak, and they didn't really go to destinations that people wanted to go to. And that's because Auckland Transport didn't have the money to put the services in place in the first place. And so it's exactly what I described before, increased density, more cars per urban square kilometre of urban development than we ever had before under traditional urban sprawl. So getting the density right with the transport services, the public transport services, is fundamental to doing this properly into the future, and that's the really important lesson we've got to learn.
Right. I would like to, on behalf of the audience, I know there's 100 more questions because this is a fantastic debate and it's something we're all passionate about. The panellists are around and a few people are around afterwards, and of course you've got lots of opportunities to have your say and ask the questions on the website, which is akhaveyoursay.nz. akhaveyoursay.nz. We really appreciate you coming here tonight. We have to go. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of people watching on streaming who would love to throw questions at us too, but it is time to go. Please join with me in thanking our panel. And now we shall all use our transport system to get home, and I'm about to jump on the bus to the airport, which cost me $15. It's fantastic. Go the bus.